One of the big revelations in your book, in fact, it's the first sentence, is about Prince Philip and Sarah Ferguson's mother. Can you just tell us about that?
Yes, it's a throwaway line where I talk about the relationship between Prince Philip and Sarah Bareilles. It's a story that's not new. It's been circulating for years, and rumours have abounded. But I think actually what my editor did was take out allegedly, and so it was there in stark that the two of them were lovers. But actually, I've known this story for about 30 years through family connections.
For decades, the public believed Prince Philip's sudden move to a remote, lonely farmhouse was just a peaceful retirement. But behind the palace walls, a far more chilling reality was playing out. Now, Sarah Ferguson, the one woman the prince completely banished from his sight, has finally broken her silence, delivering a raw, unscripted confession about the late Duke that has sent shockwaves through the monarchy. She openly describes Philip as utterly terrifying, dropping cryptic hints about what really happened during those mysterious final years he spent living completely separated from the Queen. What did she witness behind those closed doors, and why did a man who sacrificed everything for the crown suddenly flee the palace? We are unpacking the forbidden letters, the hidden surveillance rumors, and the dark history of that estate that the royal family desperately wanted to keep buried. You will want to stay until the very end, because the final piece of this puzzle changes everything we thought we knew about the longest marriage in royal history. If you love diving deep into the world's most fascinating mysteries, hit that subscribe button and join our inner circle. You won't want to miss what's coming next.
You know, there were tensions in the marriage because of his womanizing. There have been lots of stories about the Thursday Club over the years.
The official story was a beautifully crafted lie. In August of 2017, Buckingham Palace announced that 96-year-old Prince Philip was simply stepping back from public duties to enjoy a well-deserved retirement. But insiders say the reality was far more dramatic. The Duke of Edinburgh packed his bags, turned his back on Buckingham Palace, and moved into Wood Farm, a remote, weathered stone cottage on the furthest edge of the Sandringham estate. He lived there in near total isolation, surrounded by his own raw paintings and a heavy, unbroken silence. 2 miles away, the main house sat empty. The Queen remained at Windsor. For nearly 4 years, the longest marriage in royal history was entirely separated by design. This wasn't just a change of scenery, it was a quiet rebellion. For 65 years, Philip had walked exactly 2 steps behind his wife, sacrificing his naval career, his passions, and his own identity to support her destiny. Reports suggest that by his mid-90s, the weight of the crown had finally become too heavy to bear. He wanted out. At Wood Farm, the stiff royal rules instantly vanished. Staff wore casual clothes, the pans rattled in a small kitchen, and Philip finally lived completely on his own terms. It seemed like the perfect escape, a peaceful sanctuary where an old man could finally find peace. But those closest to the palace knew better. They understood that Wood Farm wasn't just a quiet retreat. It carried a dark, unspoken history, a century-old secret buried beneath the floorboards that made his choice of refuge absolutely chilling. The walls of Wood Farm harbor a dark history that the monarchy has desperately tried to wipe from the history books. Long before Prince Philip packed his bags and fled to this remote cottage, the very same house served as a golden cage for a forgotten royal child. In 1917, King George V and Queen Mary sent their youngest son, Prince John, to live at Wood Farm in total isolation. He was only a boy, but his severe medical conditions made him an embarrassment to the royal brand. To the outside world, he simply disappeared, earning him the tragic title of the Lost Prince. He spent his short life hidden away behind those weathered stone walls, tended only by a nanny and a few quiet servants. At just 13 years old, the young prince closed his eyes for the last time, his existence completely brushed under the rug by a family that prized image over blood. It is an eerie detail that the institution prefers to leave unspoken. A century later, Prince Philip chose that exact same house as his ultimate sanctuary from the overwhelming pressures of the crown. Rumors indicate the parallel was not an accident. Philip transformed the cottage entirely, stripping away the royal stiffness, redesigning the rooms, and filling the walls with his own raw artwork. He even started a small truffle farm on the grounds and kept a small flock of chickens, a detail that, perhaps unconsciously, echoed the simple life of the lonely boy who had lived there decades before him. It became a place of total freedom, where even the Queen would roll up her sleeves to do the dishes when she visited. But this quiet peace was destined to be shattered. An explosive reckoning was brewing from an unexpected outsider, a woman who held the keys to the family's darkest secrets, and she was about to drag Philip's hidden life into the blinding light of day. To Prince Philip, she wasn't just a family member, she was a direct threat to the survival of the monarchy. When the loud, fiercely independent Sarah Ferguson married Prince Andrew in 1986, she burst into the royal family like a hurricane. She laughed too loudly, spoke too freely, and completely refused to conform to the rigid protocols of the palace. While the public fell in love with her vibrant energy, behind closed doors, a bitter war was brewing. One courtier frostily dismissed her as entirely unsuitable for the role, but it was Prince Philip's reaction that truly set the stage for decades of hostility. According to sources, the Duke's disdain for Fergie was instant, intense, and deeply personal. He reportedly viewed her unfiltered nature not just as bad manners, but as a dangerous liability that could tear the family apart from the inside. Insiders say his icy glare alone was enough to completely silence a room, and Fergie quickly learned that crossing him carried a heavy price. She later confessed that the late prince was utterly terrifying, recalling how he had zero tolerance for what he considered foolish mistakes. You had to be on your absolute best behavior around him because one wrong word could ruin your standing forever. Yet, rumors indicate their explosive feud wasn't just about her loud personality. Biographers suggest a much deeper, darker grudge was simmering beneath the surface, one involving a shocking betrayal from Fergie's own family history that Philip simply could not forgive. And what happened next would trigger a ruthless campaign to push her out of the palace forever, involving jaw-dropping tactics that no one saw coming.
Kitty Kelly wrote about Philip actually being with Susan Barantes at the time of the Windsor Fire in November 1992. So, I mean, these stories have been circulating, but I think because it was sort of in there without allegedly in front of it, everyone felt, what is this stuff? And I suppose it was said when Philip was alive and, nothing happened. I think people maybe feel more uncomfortable now he's dead. The argument is he can't answer back. But, I mean, I have it on good authority, that story from actually several sources. And it wouldn't surprise me because Philip was well known as a ladies' man. Susan Barantes was exactly his type.
The hostility between Prince Philip and Sarah Ferguson wasn't just a clash of personalities, it was fueled by an explosive secret that dated back decades. Biographers have alleged that Prince Philip had once conducted a highly sensitive clandestine affair with Fergie's own mother, Susan Barantes. While the palace has never confirmed the story, rumors indicate this hidden history cast a long, twisted shadow over the family. When Fergie married into the monarchy, her very presence was a walking reminder of a past Philip desperately wanted to forget. If these claims are true, it transforms their legendary feud from standard palace politics into a deeply personal psychological war. But things were about to get much worse for the Duchess. Following her separation from Prince Andrew in 1992, Philip's coldness hardened into an absolute banishment. According to sources, the Duke went to extreme lengths to ensure she was permanently excluded from the royal inner circle. Shocking reports suggest that the palace elite utilized rigorous tracking and constant monitoring to catch any slip-up that could justify casting her out for good. It is claimed that every move she made, every phone call and every private meeting was closely observed under a microscope of royal security. Philip allegedly made it his personal mission to ensure she became a ghost within the family. He absolutely refused to be in the same room as her, forcing a bizarre protocol that fractured family gatherings for decades. But Fergie was not a woman to be easily broken. She adapted to this ruthless isolation in a way that completely baffled the Duke, setting off a high-stakes game of hide-and-seek across the royal estates that would last for the rest of his life.
I think that Her Majesty is an incredible lady, and what an icon to the country and one of the finest people in the world I've ever met. And I think that Her Majesty leads by such example.
For over 20 years, Sarah Ferguson lived as a royal ghost, forced to play a high-stakes game of hide-and-seek just to see her own family. The rules of her banishment were absolute and strictly enforced by Prince Philip himself. Insiders say that whenever the family gathered at Balmoral Castle for their summer holidays, a military-style schedule had to be drawn up behind the scenes. Fergie was allowed to visit her daughters and her ex-husband, but she had to vanish the exact second Philip was scheduled to arrive. Reports suggest her escapes were meticulously timed down to the minute. The moment the Duke's car was spotted driving up the Long Castle estate, Fergie would be rushed out of a back door, packed into an unmarked vehicle and driven away into the Scottish mist. She existed in a bizarre royal twilight zone, close enough to hear the echoes of the family dinner, but entirely blocked from entering the room. Yet, despite Philip's intense campaign to erase her, she held a secret advantage that drove him furious. She maintained a deeply private, unshakable bond with Queen Elizabeth II. Even after the explosive divorces and the relentless tabloid headlines, the Queen routinely invited Fergie for quiet, late-night tea sessions safely away from Philip's watchful eyes. Rumours indicate the monarch deeply valued her loyalty, a bond so profound that upon her passing, the Queen famously entrusted her beloved royal corgis to Fergie's care. But this dual reality couldn't last forever. The world was about to face a historic crisis, forcing Prince Philip out of his isolated sanctuary at Wood Farm and straight into a final, heartbreaking confrontation with the very system he spent his final years trying to escape. In early 2020, a global crisis achieved what decades of palace negotiations never could, forcing Prince Philip out of his isolated paradise and straight into a final trap. As lockdowns closed in around the world, the Duke was abruptly flown back to Windsor Castle. For the first time in nearly 4 years, he and the Queen were forced to live together continuously under one roof. The freedom he had fought so hard to secure at Wood Farm was completely wiped away in an instant. Insiders say that as the heavy castle gates locked behind him, his strength began to fade rapidly, as if the return to the system was draining the last of his spirit. On April 9, 2021, the Duke of Edinburgh drew his final breath at the age of 99. He passed away inside the rigid walls of Windsor Castle, the exact place he spent his final years quietly trying to escape. Reports suggest the ultimate irony of his life was that in death, the system reclaimed him entirely, trapping his memory behind the heavy velvet curtains and grand protocols he despised. But the story didn't end with his passing. When Sarah Ferguson finally broke her silence in a rare interview, she dropped a chilling phrase that reframed everything. She revealed that Philip had once left her with a cryptic warning, telling her she must be electable, but never elected. Sources suggest this was his ultimate final lesson to her, a reminder that in the royal family, you are merely a character in a script written by an ancient institution, and trying to be yourself carries a devastating cost. As the watercolors he painted still lean against the walls at Wood Farm, unframed and unfinished, we are left to wonder if anyone can ever truly escape the weight of the crown. The tangled web of alliances and bitter rivalries that Prince Philip left behind continues to shake the foundation of the monarchy. For decades, the public was led to believe that the Duke's retreat to Wood Farm was a simple, peaceful departure from public life. But the lingering silence on that remote estate, the hidden diaries, and the raw testimonies of those who survived his icy glare suggest a far more complicated truth. Philip spent his final years walking away from the heavy demands of an ancient institution, yet it was Sarah Ferguson, the very woman he cast out into the cold, who understood his ultimate sacrifice best. In the end, the system reclaimed the prince, but the mysteries buried beneath the weathered stone of Wood Farm ensure that his quiet rebellion will never truly be forgotten. What do you think really happened during those isolated years at Wood Farm? And was Prince Philip's intense hostility toward Fergie driven by a much deeper secret? Drop your thoughts and theories in the comments below. We read every single one. If this deep dive into the palace's darkest corners kept you glued to your screen, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We have some even bigger, more explosive royal investigations dropping very soon. And trust us, you will not want to miss what we uncover next.